I'd like to call to order the August 20th, 2018 meeting of the Highland Park Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Linda, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Here.
Ms. Cimarosti?
Here.
Ms. Coleman? Ms. Gowan? Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Magaziner?
Here.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola? Ms. Pietrobono?
Here.
Mr. Roslevich?
Here.
Be it resolved, pursuant to the Sunshine Act and JSA 10-4-12 and 13, the Highland Park Board of Education will now meet in closed session to discuss HIB reports, the superintendent's contract, and a personnel matter. These exemptions are permitted to be discussed in closed session in accordance with NJSA 10-4-13. Information regarding the board's closed session discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Can I please get a motion to convene to closed session?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We ensure that going along the
we
whole
will,
way.
yeah, we'll definitely track the data and see which students are getting in and see if we do see that it is becoming more equitable. We are working on, we haven't hired the advanced learning specialist yet. She's on the agenda tonight. So we wanted her to have an input into this, and the committee is meeting in September before all the multiple measures, because that was one of the things we went back on. Which are we giving more weight to one of the multiple measures than the other? How are we mapping it out when we see the data? And again, it's hard because this is the first year of it, so we don't have any preliminary data. This is going to be the first time we're going through this, and we're probably going to hit some roadblocks and see that maybe some things aren't working, but the committee will meet throughout the year and monitor how it's going.
Who's on the committee, by the way? I'm sorry. That was another question. Thank you.
Well, real quick, I just wanted to tell you that you just gave me an idea to do what I've had Mr. Lassiter do, which is to disaggregate the AP score data based on our demographics, the population of our students by demographic association. I should do the same thing with the advanced learning program and then report out like I do with the other big programs. So I'll do that.
Okay. Currently, the committee has teachers from every grade level. It was the advanced learning specialists, 2 supervisors, and Mr. Benjamin as well.
Thank you.
Everybody good?
Okay. Going back to the family letter and input survey, what's the overall procedure so that you don't have a certain segment of families, saying, oh, okay, let's get this in, as opposed to getting it from the district overall?
So it will be sent to every family. We will have it translated so that our populations, everyone can read and understands it and fill it out. We will send out reminders. I don't know if we can get it in Genesis. One of the things was to also put it in Genesis with all of the letters, but that's something I'm working on to see if we can do that with all the other forms that they have to fill out, so that maybe there's a better chance that we will get the information from the majority of parents.
And that is just one component of many components as to how students would filter into this. Okay.
Yeah, it's only one piece of it.
Okay.
It's not going to exclude any.
I want to point out that it's Mariah Belber on the agenda, who we are recommending be the specialist. She happens to have dual certification, special ed, as well as general education, which we think would be helpful as she differentiates in the pushing environment, both the pull-out environment. Are there other questions? If not, I thank you so much. You took such ownership over this program, and you know it in and out, and I was very impressed myself. So I'm going to send Ms. Knapp home because it's a long week or two. She's going to be facilitating new teacher workshops all next week, and then we hit the ground running the week after that. So please go home.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
I want to shift gears from academic support to social, emotional and behavioral support. I'm going to hand out two things. One, the New Jersey Department of Education Student Safety Data System Guidance Booklet. That's the SSDS book. I think I emailed this to everybody as well, but so you have it for tonight. It's coming in paper form. And then copies of our Code of Conduct, which you've seen numerous times, but here it is again, so you can refer to it. So the reason why we talk about managing behaviors when we discuss the Code of Conduct is because we didn't look at our codes of conduct as means to correct violations against our discipline code as much as we did a way to help kids self-regulate, enhance their interpersonal skills with each other, provide them all the direction they need as they test the boundaries all the way through high school, what they can and can't do. They're growing up and they're learning about what it is to become independent in this world. I just realized that Ms. Knapp took my pointer. Oh, no. Here it is. So let me first begin by giving you some background on the process. A group called the Discipline Study Group spent 15 months examining our existing code of conduct, or what was the existing code of conduct, and then we completely revamped it. There were, in almost all meetings, 18 contributors, including several students from the middle and the high school, who, by the way, I thought were a nice cross-representation of the diversity of our community as well. And we had 3 board members who represent the Equity and Excellence Committee. Now, this group not only worked side by side after school, we spent a full day in May just putting the wraps on our work. We also attended conferences. There's a shot of our group, including 2 students who attended a workshop led by Ann Gregory, whose name I'll mention a few times in the next couple of minutes, which was all about discipline equity. So the folks involved in this process ended up coming together not only around the Code of Conduct and its revamp, but also around the thinking of a vision for how we're going to help kids grow, not just what we do if they break the rules. These are some shots of both board members and principals and teachers and students working together side by side to produce what I just handed out. The Code of Conduct for every school is somewhat based on a model built in the Syracuse City School District. Why Syracuse? Well, a couple of reasons. One, they've been at the approach of integrating restorative practices with accountability for years. They worked with Ann Gregory. Ann is, as you know, a resident, a parent in our school district, and also a leading expert in the area of both restorative practices and discipline equity. She worked with Syracuse, so it was natural for us to look to them as a model around which we could build our code of conduct. We tried very hard as we enter our second year of a 3-year implementation plan for restorative practices at the middle high school to build that language in to the codes while at the same time marrying the need for accountability. One thing that Dr. Gregory has emphasized is that restorative practices isn't a way of disciplining students. It's a way of building community for the adults and the kids. And when married with accountability measures can help guide kids, can help them grow. So what you're going to see in the codes of conduct I handed out, and this will be available, I'll place this on the websites tomorrow, both the all school websites. It'll be under the quick links drop-down menu. You will see for every school a system of responses that we will incorporate when kids violate one of the codes. Every school has a different set of these 4 levels. that is specifically suited for the maturity level of the student. Every one of these levels, and I'm zooming in on just an example of the high schools, level 1 and 2, which are the lowest levels of response, levels 3 and 4 being the highest levels. Every level incorporates restorative practice language. For instance, as is the case with the high school, we are careful with level 1 response. The student acts out, let's say is disruptive in class, sent to the assistant principal. We will be speaking with that student and talking a lot with him or her about how whatever action took place to disrupt the class affected people, not only the students and peers, but also the teacher or other adults in the class. By the way, our assistant principal at the high school just completed 4 days of restorative practice training, and she's going to be going back to IIRP for the second level of training, so she can then be a trainer, a turnkey trainer. Our youth safety specialist, Sean Harrison, was also trained during those 4 days. The process of developing these codes of conduct, as I said, took 15 months. I go back to March of 2017. We spent 3 meetings in 2017 before the summer, just talking as a group, very honestly and openly, about relationships, student-teacher relationships. Students around the table talked about how they connected better with teachers. They liked teachers who respected them, who talked with them, not at them, who rolled with them in cases when they were angry or had a bad day. In other words, they didn't just look at their situations as black and white. There were gray areas. We spent 3 1.5-hour meetings, at least on 1 or 2 occasions. It probably went 2 hours, I don't recall. But they were very lengthy, rich meetings in which we openly discussed relationships and biases. Biases that the kids were noticing, our teachers and other adults, whether conscious or subconscious, they feel may have influenced the way they were treating them and how they were using the code, the back then existing code of conduct. Then in September of this past school year, September 2017, we spent a lot of time coming up with a vision as a group of 18. Well, what did we want? What kind of language did we want in this code of conduct? What did we want it to look like? We used the Syracuse model as on the side there. We would look at it from time to time. We actually had a teacher with us whose sister works in Syracuse, who was giving us some input about some of the challenges that they were experiencing. One of which is, and it's a real takeaway for us, that they apparently are experiencing in Syracuse, is that the teachers in those schools are not being trained in how to leverage the code of conduct. In other words, it seems that in at least a few of the schools up there, according to this person, Syracuse put it out there and then may not have done a lot of follow-up to be sure that teachers fully understood when to send a student to the assistant principal, when to work with the situation in-house, in the classroom, when and how to use restorative practices language when trying to cool down a student who might be very frustrated, very upset. And then about November, we started to hit the books, and we started to develop charts like you see in the finished product. That took us all the way to May. Sometime after May, I shared the codes of conduct with members of the board, full board, got some input from them. I then shared it with our board attorney, because one of the things I do want to point out, as you can see, on the right side of each chart, of each code of conduct violation chart, we actually incorporated checklist columns to indicate when certain violations of the code of conduct would call for us to refer the incident to the state as part of the SSDS reporting system, which I'm going to explain in a couple of minutes, and when, if at all, we had to contact law enforcement. So we spent a lot of time working with various individuals, including our board attorney, to get guidance so that we knew how to very correctly and accurately indicate when certain things should be referred in these 2 cases. So let me just point out that in the past, the previous iterations of the Code of Conduct, we we didn't have these columns. We just kind of did it based on our knowledge, based on experience. If we felt something should be referred to law enforcement, we would pick up the phone and contact Officer Joe. Now what we're doing is we're explicitly stating what should be and what shouldn't be referred to law enforcement or should be reported for SSDS reporting. And it's really my job to hold the leadership team accountable for being sure that we're actually following these codes of conduct. Of course, the other difference between the current code of conduct that I'm sharing with you and the previous versions, we've very, very specifically laid out what violations will constitute the different levels of response. And that's being done consistently now from Irving all the way up to high school senior year. Now, speaking of reporting, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about a concern that has come up from some members of our community and board about what we report, how we report it. There are two primary reporting systems in all of our schools. At least one school has another layer of reporting, Bartle, and I'll talk about that in a second. The two primary streams of reporting are one to the state, as required and framed by the guideline book that I shared with the board, and also internally through our student information system, Genesis. The SSDS report requires us to refer all the incidences that I've listed up on this slide, and just these incidences, to an electronic system. Now, all information we share is anonymous in that we do not share student names or student ID numbers. The state does not get hold of that information. What it does want is demographic information, ethnicity, race, gender. Doesn't ask for socioeconomic status, ELL status if the student is getting English as a second language services, and of course the nature of the incident and the category of the incident. And the state's doing this, as the guideline book points out, because it's being imposed upon by the federal government to report out statistics. And by the way, the New Jersey media does publish these statistics when the Department of Education puts its data out every year. All that data on violence and vandalism and fighting and HIB that you read about in the Star-Ledger and the Record and the Philadelphia Inquirer that reports in South Jersey, that's all coming out of this reporting system, the SSDS reporting system. But again, I need to emphasize that we are not sharing student names or ID numbers. This is an example that I want to show the community. Even the board can read more of these examples in the back of a scenario that the guideline book presents to administrators who refer to the guideline book for some guidance. There are several scenarios that the state presents, I'll let you read this one to yourself, to give us a better idea as to what should be reported and what shouldn't. So here's a scenario referring to what looks like an assault or a fight between two kids in kindergarten. And what the state is suggesting is that we report this as an assault, and it explains why. Had a weapon been used, now we're talking about kindergarten, nevertheless, had a weapon been used, i.e. a stick, or I mean something bigger than a stick, like a, I don't know, a big rock maybe, then we would have to report this as an assault with weapon. It does not discriminate by age group. This is a scenario coming straight out of the Department of Education's guidebook, and it refers to a kindergarten situation. Now, I need to point out, this is the definition of assault according to the State Department of Education on the screen here. What we've done in Highland Park internally is we have, rather than just go with a blanket one-sentence statement that defines assault, we've actually broken out what we think assault is. There could be, I guess you could refer to it as simple assault. We don't call it that. We call it something else. In other words, a student hits another student but doesn't cause bodily harm. We actually have a category just for that. Then we have another category for assault with bodily harm. Then we have another category, I believe, a third category, assault with a weapon. What we've done is we've tried to provide shades to the definition of assault in our 4 school codes of conduct, as opposed to just sticking with the one blanket statement. I do want to come back to the second incident reporting system, and that's the internal reporting system. As I pointed out, we do keep records of student violations of code of conduct in Genesis. We do it for a number of reasons. This is, by the way, an example of a student's conduct record in Genesis from last year. I've zoomed in on it so you can get a sense of what we incorporate. We put the date of the incident, the infraction, and what action may have been taken. Let me clarify what goes into an incident report, what does it, what we use it for. First of all, incident reports that we keep in-house in Genesis don't go anywhere else. They stay right here. If a student transfers to another district, we don't send the conduct report to that district. If a student, when a student graduates, we don't give it to anybody at that point. It's just for our use. Why? No, a couple of reasons. One, because just like we keep academic performance information on a student, so we could tell the story of a student's academic progress or regressions, so what must we do so in the case of behavior? We have several resources for students in the different schools. For instance, the Teen Center at the middle high school sometimes needs information to be able to adapt its counseling strategies based on the history of misbehaviors. We can tell, for instance, if we track some of this information internally, if things have regressed, if the behaviors are getting more severe, if there's some commonality in the behaviors. Oh, we have a student who appears to be harassing mostly kids of the opposite sex. Number of HIB reports have come up. We use that information so that we can help the student redirect his or her behavior and self-regulate behavior as well. We also use the information in case we have to, unfortunately, place the student in an alternative out-of-district placement, which was at least a situation we had last year in one case. Those schools may ask us for information, and we may need to share something with them based on the information we're tracking internally in order to help them support the student. The information that we keep in Genesis is tucked away year after year. We do not roll over the information from one year to the next. So for instance, in this next school year, every conduct file in Genesis is wiped clean. We do not take everything that happened, like this student's report from last year, and just roll it over into the next year. We archive it, we keep it in the past, but that's only accessible by administrators, not by teachers. It's a blank slate each year. The other reporting system I did allude to earlier is that which takes place at Bartle. Some schools that I've worked in keep their own records or have their own protocol, their own process, so they can manage referrals that teachers may make about kids who are misbehaving. At Bartle, they use paper slips, since the teachers can't go into Genesis directly. And so if they have a concern about a student or an issue with a student, they'll write something on a slip that they use, a referral slip, and they'll either they'll hand it to the main office, and then somebody at the main office will pick it up and work with it. Could be a counselor, could be the student and staff teacher support person, it could be the principal. It could be our mental health specialist, Regina Strenger, who sometimes makes her way up to Bartle, even though she's based at Irving. So that's their way at Bartle of just keeping track of the incidences, since the teachers don't report directly into Genesis. We do hold on to those referral forms. Any incident that we record in Genesis or that might be recorded on the yellow sheet can be retracted if a parent or a guardian meets with the principal and there's an agreement that, you know what, this incident, in the end, this was just a misunderstanding, or in fact, after further investigation, they realized that facts weren't straight and the incident didn't take place. We can wipe the record. So that was a question that came up from one of our parents in the community. There may be instances in which a parent or guardian meets with the principal and they discuss a matter, and turns out that the parent guardian sheds new light on a situation, and the principal agrees, you know what, you're right, there's some new tangent to this incident. we can go into the record and we can tweak it as necessary and modify it. So I think I've covered all the bases. I can see some questions, nonverbals, speaking loudly. Ruth, did you want to ask first?
Just, do parents have ongoing access to the running behavioral records that are in Genesis?
It's a good question. So parents don't have ready access to it in the parent portal, but
Right.
there's nothing that would stop a parent from walking into a main office and saying, hey, I'd like to see my student's
Because
contact
that
record.
was one of the issues that Catherine brought
We're not
up.
hiding this information.
So
There's
Scott,
nothing.
but are you sure about that? Because I was just in Genesis today, as a matter of fact, looking to see if schedules were in there. There is a discipline tab for parents.
I'll check. I wasn't
And
aware
well,
that there,
but
would,
But
that there is.
that's not everything.
Right,
That's
but
like
I
the
don't-
big things that maybe required some discipline, like detention or
Right,
after-school
because I just
suspension.
noticed that today, that there is a discipline tab, but I don't know what shows up there.
I don't know if we're populating it yet, but I'll follow up with that.
There's nothing there now. I mean, now there's nothing in Genesis, like no schedules, no anything. But there is a tab for discipline that I, as a parent, can
Right.
see.
Yeah,
but
there
I
are
don't-
some things in there, but not everything. So if a parent wants to see their child's discipline portfolio, can they have access to that at any time?
Of course, there's
Because
absolutely
that was
nothing
an
wrong
issue.
with that. No different than
Okay.
if a parent wants to see his child's academic portfolio.
Okay.
Hey, I want
Or-
to see
Or
my
a
kid's-
teen center record. You
Wait,
can ask for
wait.
teen second, as long as your kid is under 18, you can get whatever records the district has. They're,
Right.
I mean, they're.
It's your
public
kid.
doc- Yeah.
But could we back up one step, which is not whether a parent could take a look, but is the parent notified each time a child appears in a report or is given a yellow slip? And that's part A, and part B is the Bartle system, the yellow slip system. Is it the same rules and regulations that a child would be given a yellow slip as the SSDS, or?
No. The yellow slips are just a means of helping them keep
Okay,
track of incidences so that there can be some
But what
follow-up.
are the incidences that generate a yellow slip as opposed to what the incidents?
I think
that would-
everything gets a yellow slip, and then they decide whether
Everything?
it gets elevated.
Correct.
If there's
I mean,
any kind
you know,
of, if they
every
want
building
somebody
has
other
its
than a
own-
teacher to intervene, if they want the principal or a guidance counselor or whatever, write it down on the slip and,
Why do
I mean, the operation of the building,
Why do we have, like, it sounds like 3 parallel systems, and at least one of the systems, which is the yellow slips, is only used in one of the buildings. And by the parents' testimony last week, and from what I've heard from other people in the community, including board members, the yellow slip system seems to have a life of its own, and no rules that the board has heard of, which I think as a board we should have some input. The state has input on this SSDS or whatever it's called, and we've certainly had input on our code of conduct with different classes, 1, 2,
but if the
3.
yellow slips
So
aren't being recorded in Genesis necessarily, or they're not
being
records.
maintained.
they're
They're
being
being
maintained
held. They're
in
being
binders,
held.
and they're being used as a
A way to track.
way to keep track. And again, from the testimony that we heard, the parents said, the teacher said, I have to report this even though it's nothing. And those weren't the exact words, but they're pretty close to the exact words. And I don't understand why we have a parallel system. In fact, let's not talk about the state system. Let's talk about our system. Why do we have a parallel system? Isn't our code of conduct good enough so that if 2 kids run into each other in the hallway, it sounded like you write both kids up because they bumped arms? It really sounded that way to me, and I think it sounded that way to a lot of board members.
In the code of conduct, though, it makes it clear, it differentiates between kids that are involved in horseplay or kids that are
Right,
kind of running
right,
into each other
right.
that way. That is not it's a level 1 violation, but it certainly wouldn't rise to a high level. However, the same thing seems to be getting written up as a yellow piece of paper in Bartle, but it doesn't necessarily get report it to the state in SSDS. It seems like there are three different ways
Or
that
to
each
the parent,
incident.
or to the parents,
and is the
or in
parent
Genesis.
even finding out about it?
And used as an evaluation mechanism about the students, about the children.
Well,
And any system like that, which is not documented and approved, and, you know, I'm not a bureaucrat, but the board should have some input in this. And also, it's not the same as anything being used in any of the other schools, right?
Well, look,
The
monitoring
middle school
student
isn't using
behavior
a
in the
yellow
monitoring student behavior in the student information system is common in every district which I've worked. I don't think you're going to find
But
Does
you're
the
not
high
talking
school
about
do
the
something?
system.
Does the high school do something similar to the yellow pieces
No,
of paper?
but not as far as I'm
Does the middle
aware.
school do something? Does the Irving school does something? It sounds to me like they don't. So I don't understand why it's being used at all.
Can I, just because I'm trying to be clear on that too, what you said was that Bartle uses the referral yellow slip system instead of Genesis, so it really is supposed to be their Genesis, right, in terms of the discipline reporting, correct, or incident
No, I
reporting?
think they do both.
They do both.
So, okay, I thought you said teachers do not have access to Genesis, that's why they use these slips.
At Bartle.
At Bartle.
Correct.
That's
They
why.
they don't have
use-
access to Irving either, and as far as
The administrators would put it into
to
Genesis.
input the information.
So it's like, that's
so
how
the
the
yellow
teachers
slips-
get it to, that's how the teachers get it to
So if I'm a
the
teacher
main
and I'm
office.
sitting there, I'm teaching my lesson, all of a sudden Johnny starts throwing a pencil across the classroom, being disruptive. I'm that teacher. I'm going to take my yellow slip. I'm envisioning how it's going to go, right? And I'm writing up a note about Johnny throwing a pencil, being disruptive. I'm going to keep it here, and then during my prep or during lunch, I'm going to bring it to the main office, and I'm going to give it to the main office. That's going to be the trigger to react to the problem.
And then the parent gets a call?
If it's severe enough to warrant some kind of disciplinary action, or it all depends on the incident. It might
Well,
not if it's not something which is worth calling home about.
Scott, if the yellow sheet of paper is a mechanism for a teacher to report something that is part of our code of conduct, is a violation of the code of conduct, and that's all it's used for, and it will be guaranteed to be put into Genesis in all the proper ways we've approved and reviewed, I have no problem with it. They can use smoke signals for all I care, or telex machines. But it sounded to me, and it sounds to me like the yellow slip of paper system is an ad hoc, one school only system which doesn't match the code of conduct. And that concerns me.
And that
the board
Mr.
should be,
Burton said-
and the administration should, and superintendent should be reviewing, should be approving whatever system we use. And that yellow slip of paper seems, I'm not even pointing any fingers at any teachers or administrators. It's probably been used here for 20 years, but it should match what we do.
But
I
so
also
why
think-
don't the teachers there, though, have access like the other teachers? Why do the
Well-
teachers at Bartles not have access as the other teachers in the other schools do? Is that,
Or
is there a
Irving,
reason
for that matter.
They may not, frankly, I think it's just because they haven't set it up yet, and they haven't trained the teachers in how to go in there and input that information.
My issue is that if we're trying to help kids to overcome behavioral challenges, or even if it's not a challenge, but they misbehave in one day, and that rises to the level of that child being reported in whatever way, don't we want the parents to know about it so that the parents can reinforce whatever it is that we're trying to work with the kids on, to talk with them, sit them down when they get home? I mean, to me, if there's something that we're writing down to keep track of something that's important enough for us to do that, it's important enough for the parent or the guardian to be made aware of it so that when they sit down at dinner or beforehand or whatever, that they can talk about it and hopefully get that turned around. Because I think a lot of, a lot of our issues, I think, can be improved by additional communication to the home. And because I think parents, at least most of them, will try to be helpful if they're aware. Just my
well,
thought.
right, and they don't want it to snowball. So can we be
Right.
sure that that's what happens? I'm still just trying to understand the difference between what happens at Bartle, I think as we all are.
Yeah.
But,
And at Irving, I don't have a clear understanding.
and can
of
there
that
be a
at Irving.
consistency? Can the teachers at Bartle then be included in this access to Genesis?
They
so
can
that they
be. I
can-
mean,
so that at least there's
I
continuity
think what I
with-
would like to do is sit down with Mr. Benjamin and make sure that there isn't another compelling reason why he has to use the system. He did inherit it. Maybe there's a rationale for why they started it from the get. They used Power School at one point, so it's not as if we're now moving to a digital system for the first time, which has changed from Power School to Genesis. And if there's not a strong rationale for it, I don't see why we can't train the teachers in how to go into Genesis and directly
To me, it
input
makes
the
sense,
information.
especially because, again, we're trying to, again, look at our whole code and approach to managing our students' behaviors and helping them manage their behaviors, and yet we're not exactly managing the system in a way that's,
I guess I'm
me,
taking it
is
too lightly.
synonymous
I've seen the
across-
yellow sheets just as a managerial.
Well, but I think the
Process.
issue becomes when they're presented to parents as a like, see, I get hundreds of these a week, as a like this example of what am I supposed to do? Like, and then that gives the impression to parents like, holy mackerel, where am I sending my kids? I mean, if there's hundreds of these yellow slips being generated
And some
on a
of them
weekly
seem,
basis.
some of them seem to be
that-
for such minor
So,
kind of
right, so
horseplay
now,
type of
I mean,
issues.
actually, Scott, could you go back to the slide with the example that you gave, the Max and Ricky? Because I think this kind of gets to the heart of what we're talking about. You gave this example out of here, and I found the example in here. And in this scenario that they give, they play out two possible conclusions to this. One is that the kid was just swinging it around, didn't mean to hit Ricky accidentally, and was like, oh, gee whiz, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt him. Then it's no reporting. The scenario that you put up here is, I don't like him, he was mean to me, so I smacked him with a stick and he's bleeding and he had to go to the nurse. That gets reported to assault, as assault. But what I'm hearing parents come to us continually saying is, Ricky was just swinging the stick around on the playground, didn't mean to hurt anybody, and it's getting reported as assault.
According to our code
I
of
feel like
conduct,
an
that wouldn't warrant
example-
SSDS reporting. If you look at the code, for instance, if there's, let me get a hold of it. Give you an example at the high school.
Well, I did the high school one.
But I think it gets to that issue of interpretation, right? Of what are we mandated to report? And this is telling us if a kid does something accidentally, doesn't mean to hurt someone, we don't have to report that as assault. You know, but we picked the incident here that does lead to the assault. But there is also an alternate scenario here that says, gee whiz, Ricky didn't mean to do
right,
anything
that's the
to
question
Max.
of intent.
Well,
And in this
but-
case, that the intent was
So
that
that's on page 15, if
that's a
anybody's
different,
interested.
and that's
in
a
looking
totally
at this
different
scenario.
thing.
Right, because
I agree.
because the assumption would be that that case wouldn't reach the SSDS, it wouldn't rise to that occasion, correct? Because we would have caught that in our system of, okay, that doesn't meet the requirements of state reporting.
Right.
But is that, we're looking for actually that.
And it seems like what parents are reporting to us, and of course, as board members, it's hard for us to know because we're not in the buildings, we're not seeing what's going on, but what's being reported to us is a hypervigilance, that any time there's any physical contact, this is being reported as assault, it's being over-reported, it's being over-documented, it's being overreacted to. I think that's what is your responsibility to suss out. Like, how much of this is over-reporting? Maybe you need to go sit and spend a couple hours with the Yellow Book. I don't know. There's got to be a way to get to the heart of what this is. But to me, the little Max and Ricky scenario is the heart of it because it could go one of two ways.
I'm not saying this is the magic bullet, but it's a help in the right, it's a step in the right direction. For instance, if you look at the high school vandalism category, we actually broke out different types of vandalism. In the past, misuse of school property without damage may very well have been reported to SSDS because no matter what, it's vandalism. But here we've actually broken out the type of vandalism that has to be reported to SSDS, the type that doesn't. I'm looking for the assault categories, so I can't find them right away, but I'm thinking that we did clarify.
Scott,
what-
in Bartle, where it says shove, push, kick, strike, it says there are X's in the first three columns. Okay, so level 3 consequences when intent is determined and confirmed. Right. So I think
As an example?
I think intent is the entire thing.
Right.
So if we're not doing our job to determine intent in the first, I think that's the very first step. is determining intent, and that's our job. Our meaning, our employees' job. They have to figure it out. They have to determine, was the intent to injure the other kid? Was the intent because there's some sort of issue between the two of them, or was it playful in nature?
And that was
They
what
have to
we
figure it out.
Right, and that was what was being reported to us by Justin and Catherine. Like, their kid hit another kid playfully. Wasn't enough that either of the kids reported it to parents, no adults reported it to parents either, but then it's recorded as an assault.
Yeah, and to me, that should show up nowhere, not on any kind of piece of paper. Honestly, I don't see how that, and I can understand why it doesn't matter who the child is. If the parent were to find out about that as a playful incident, but somehow their child was reported as to have, been guilty of misconduct when it was a playful incident,
I
don't
have
see
no
it.
problem with what you just said. And I can't say that we actually report those things in Genesis. I'd have to look and to take a deeper dive.
But the
But I
Genesis-
have no disagreement with that.
Scott, I think the point the board is trying to make is it's not, I think, about Genesis that many of us are concerned. It's a point about this parallel system.
Understood.
And that's really, I believe, what many of us, or all of us perhaps, are asking you to investigate.
Okay.
So that we don't have a parallel system and any real incident gets put as it should into Genesis so a parent can review it, and that we have the proper record.
One of the
And
things
the
that,
parental
as we were talking in the
notification
first day that we sat down in that group, it was important to that group that our policy, our new policy, was consistent, but fair.
I'm going to follow up with the board in old business in the September 17th meeting, so I can share with the community what my findings are, whatever resolution we have to the parallel reporting. This is a living document. I'm going to be meeting with the discipline study group throughout the year, so it's not as if this is it, we're done. Although I don't anticipate changes being made throughout the school year, I think we should wait until the end of the school year to make any updates in the name of fairness.
Scott, could
And
I? Go.
I'm sorry, the yellow slips again. So what happens to the yellow slips at the end of the school year? Do they just get shredded? Or
That's a good question. I didn't ask that.
I don't know.
Perhaps it's in a binder placed on a shelf, no different than we put archived the Genesis information in a drop-down menu from last year. I'll find that out for you as well.
I had a different kind of question. On one of your sheets here with a long list of disciplinary actions, it lists teacher detention. I have no idea what teacher detention means.
Teacher distinction?
Detention.
Oh, detention. When a
What does
teacher
that
might
mean?
keep a student after school for a half hour.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Or during lunch,
Thank
at
you,
the upper
thank
grades,
you.
the upper
Okay.
grades, middle and high
Okay,
school.
thank you.
All right,
It's been a long time.
we all done?
I'm going to shut this
We are.
down so you're not blinded.
Just a quick follow-up question.
All right.
Scott, going back to the district code of conduct, I know the high school published theirs with the handbook, but I didn't see it posted for the Bartle School, Irving School, or middle school. So each one of these codes of conducts is going to be published on the...
In the handbook.
In the
But I'm also going to put it on the website because
You're gonna
it's
throw it on the
parents asking me about.
But one of the things I was looking at is like where at the high school, like certain things, like sexual in nature, where you have like sexual harassment would be reported to law enforcement, but then it wouldn't be reported if it happened at the middle school. But it would be reported if it happened at Bartle. So there seems to be some inconsistency in the response as to
I'll
like
double
on
check
level-
that.
on some of the level 4 offenses.
Well, and I can't answer to that particular one, but one of the things that the group did try to do was to frame the responses based on the age of the kids and the school level. Otherwise, there would simply be one.
But Rob, my only concern about what Mr. Johnson, is that what Levitt said, is that we had our attorney review this
Correct.
document, and it could be a typo on my part that I left out of X.
Right.
So I'm going to have to verify that before I
Yeah,
publish.
there's just a few spots.
Leave
where
it to Rob to pick out the places where there's, so you can do those kind of things with Scott outside, okay?
But thanks for pointing that out, Rob. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bring that up later.
You're like a little robot that like picks out things that are like beep, 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 that one's not right, beep, 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 that one's not right.
Yes, Rob, you're a little robot.
All right, so with Scott's report concluded, if you guys are okay, since we have folks who I'm assuming are here to provide public comment, instead of making them sit through all of our committee reports, which you may want to stay and do, but if you don't, I will give you that out. If it's okay with everyone, I'll move public comment up to 11, switch 11 and 12.
Sure.
Yep, okay. So Linda, can we go ahead and do that? So we will make item number 11 public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and reserve this time for your comments. So you can come up to the podium, just state your name and address for the record, and please write it down on the piece of paper that should be there, so the board secretary can record it in her notes as well. Not a yellow slip. It will not be recorded.
I'm Jennifer Evans, and 138 and 136. Actually, I wasn't planning on speaking today, but actually a couple things sitting through this meeting came up, and so I just want to bring up the two things that I wrote notes. I was really excited to see about the G&T program. I know this has been something in the works, and I just wanted to get some clarification. I know that you had asked, and I had the same question, is how does that translate to the middle school and then to the high school? And I know you had mentioned something about, well, it doesn't, the G&T program doesn't, but you're going to offer other classes. So let's look through your, what is it, the Pathway to Excellence. In G2A4, you've actually mentioned that in the middle school you're looking to detrack. So I'm wondering, how are you translating that to, how are you going to accommodate children on different levels if you're detracking the sciences, I guess?
That's a good question. We'll actually be narrowing the levels. We're not going to detract completely. So for instance, right now in 6th grade, we have 3 levels. We're looking to go down to 2 levels. So for those kids who are gifted in math, they'll still have that accelerated pathway. So for a 6th grader, it could mean pre-algebra, or it could just mean grade that'll be pre-algebra, and then 7th grade would be algebra, and then 8th grade would be geometry. 7th and 8th grade currently have 4 different levels. We would look to reduce them to 3.
So just just a general comment. I actually do have an education degree and certified teacher and everything. When you start creating a larger, our classes are getting larger, and it creates a real hardship on the teachers when you start creating a pool of students that has such a wide variety of ranges. So to ask them to differentiate now these wide ranges, it really is a hardship on the teachers, and I just wonder how they're going to be able
That's a great question. So there are actually a couple of ways we're thinking of doing that. By the way, we're going to be starting a advisory group, so if there's something you're interested in, we spoke earlier, you should email me and I can tuck your name away and put you on that list. We would, first of all, over the summer of 2019, bring our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade math teachers together so they can vertically articulate the curricula. So we make sure that we don't have the issue of kids entering 6th grade with all of these different skill levels, because we did our work down in 4th grade and 5th grade. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about adding a support class for the 6th graders who might not have made the middle track in 6th grade cut, but just need that little bit of extra help. They would be placed in a cycle class that would provide them extra math support. Those are just 2 ways we're talking about trying to reduce the load. And of course, we're going to be working with our teachers to more effectively differentiate instruction. We might look at our personnel and find the individuals. Since we're such a small program, we only have 1 or 2 teachers teaching math in each grade level. We might want to relook at our personnel and consider somebody who is a perfect match for that kind of model if the person doing it right now doesn't feel comfortable with it.
And we are also looking at continually keeping class sizes lower. We're certainly not looking to allow class sizes
yeah, I don't want you to think
spiral
that
out of
because we're
control.
merging.
Like,
Well,
it- that,
I
yeah.
just, I see all these buildings and construction going on like the school.
Yeah, no.
So-
And actually, I mean, Mr. Krieger over here, who's the chair of our Finance and Facilities Committee, has been doing a heroic job of tracking enrollment, and we now look at enrollment on a monthly basis, and our enrollment's actually lower, believe it or not, even with all the development. So it does seem like we're going to hit some, and which is why we're doing this, because we have the same fear. You see all this additional construction going on, it must be translating into additional seats in the schools, and it's really not. We're holding very steady. So
It was on a decrease. So without the additional building, it would have continued to go down. So for a variety of reasons. But it's been very, very steady for about 2.5 or 3 years.
yeah, so as long as we keep class sizes at a reasonable level, I think our teachers should be able to handle the level of differentiation. And so far they are. I mean, right now we're not tracking in math at all until we get into 6th grade. And Bartle teachers, actually, I mean, they're loving the professional development that they're getting in math right now. And I don't think we've heard many, yeah, I mean, they're over the moon about the professional development that they're getting in math. And we haven't heard any concerns about the lack of tracking in Bartle, even though it has been there historically. And so we're looking to just move that model up to the 6th grade. But as Scott said, to keep that upper track there are always going to be kids in math who just want to, do calculus when they're 4. I don't know. I wasn't that kid. My kids aren't those kids, but there are those kids.
Either, but I know that there are kids out there.
Sure.
And, you obviously when you're going to college, the schools are looking at your transcripts, and I want
Right.
to make sure. It would be nice if we can follow along and have advanced math classes throughout, so kids who are able to do it and want to do it can do it.
Sure. And just saying detracking can sound like this very scary thing, but what the board's goal is not to take away opportunities for kids, but to make sure that the kids who have been historically stuck in the lower tracks, which once you get up to the high school level, you can walk down our hallways and you will see white and Asian kids in this class and black and brown kids in that class. We're trying to stop that from happening, and we're trying to make sure that all kids have the same opportunities.
And that's the point. I just don't want to make sure. I want to make sure that we are keeping all ends.
Absolutely.
And not forgetting about the achievers,
Yep.
because they are easily forgotten and then they become problems.
I think what's really amazing is that Highland Park has a reputation of being a high-performing school district. We just accorded the U.S. News and World Report accolade of gold status, yet we've been resting on the laurels of our high achievers. We have not really done enough for those kids who are in these lower tracks, not being exposed to the same rigorous curriculum as their peers. Imagine the status of our district, if you just want to look at it from that vain perspective, if all those kids were also high achieving.
All right, so the next thing that I wanted to bring up was I had a question about the code of conduct, the new code of conduct. I need clarity. Because I was looking through this briefly, level 2, level 3, level 4, at what level does the parent, and not the aggressor, but the parent of the victim get notified?
If a restorative circle is in order, absolutely. If it's a situation in which the victim has been harmed emotionally or physically, absolutely. And if that's not happening, I need to know about it. Can you give me a scenario?
Well, I don't want to go into the details, but we had an incident this year, and I was not notified until at least the 5th or 6th incident. Actually, I wasn't notified. I was not notified by the school at all. And this is after multiple nurse visits. So I had a very big concern, and there was no notification to me that my child had gone to the nurse several times. So my next question is what I found out through going through this process is that the code of conduct this past year was a mess. There was no consistency, and nobody knew what to do. I got a different answer from different people, and there was no communication within the school as well. If I talked to one person, they didn't know that this had happened, and another person knew some of this. It was just, I felt it was confused. And what I got from that is the code of conduct is actually in flux. So there was really no code of conduct. So I'm glad to see that there's a code of conduct now. So I guess my next question is I'm all for this restorative practice. I really do believe in it. I want to know what happens in this restorative practice or this experience that we go through if, in order for it to be successful, all parties need to collaborate, correct? What happens when a party decides not to collaborate?
Yeah, we've actually, as a board, we've discussed that, and the people we work with who have trained us have told us that it's not a good thing to force somebody to participate in a circle.
Okay, I'll agree with that, but I want to know what happens. How do you explain to your child who has had emotional, is emotionally upset, has been physically harmed, how do I explain that we can't go any further?
Well, what should happen is that then that child should be, especially if it's an upper grade child, the middle high school, referred to the teen center for somebody to talk to, and maybe even get to a point at which they could come back to the circle and actually have a restorative circle. And that's happened. I mean, we've had situations in which kids have fought. I'm leaving parents and guardians out of the picture. The kids don't want to get together in a circle, but then they've worked with some of our adults, and they decide, okay, maybe I can repair my relationship. I'm going to come back to it a couple of weeks later, a month later. That's what should happen. Now, if I'm a parent, as you are, and I didn't get a follow-up call, well, that's not a good thing. First of all, I've got to make sure that my principals are communicating with both the parents and guardians of victims as well as offenders. But I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling the main office and I'm saying, hey, look, I need some help for my child. I mean, she comes home, she's scared, she doesn't want to go back to school. What can you do for me? And at that point, there should be either referral to the guidance counselor or, in most cases, referral to the teen center at the upper grades. At the lower grades, we work more with our guidance counselors.
So, I mean, I will say, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but this is a recurring theme of this lack of communication home. So I think this does really need to be a topic of discussion between you and the folks in the building. Like, when there should be that contact home so parents know if there's something that's going on with their kid in school on either end of that equation.
And I just want to reiterate the fact that when this new code of conduct is, if it's signed off on or whatever, that the staff gets trained on it and they know what to do, when to do it. Because, like I said, this past year has been an eye-opener for me and it's been extremely disappointing. And not only for me, for my child who came to me with the code of conduct that she signed off of in her handbook this year and said, why is this not happening? I don't understand, Mommy. So. I mean, these kids are old enough, at least in middle school and high school, to read a piece of paper that you are requiring them to sign, and they're saying the school isn't doing what they're saying they're going to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jen. You're good.
We need to sign in as well.
Yes, please.
John Evans, 136th Avenue as well. Two things. Actually, let's go back to the demarcation of math. And my apologies, Scott, because I haven't seen everything. One question, though. So let's just do some math. So we'll say in 6th grade, you're saying we have 3, and then we're going down to 2. Okay, so I'm throwing these numbers out there just because it makes it easy, and I'm an English guy, not a math guy. 60 kids, right? 20 in each level. Now, if we get, right, yeah, you see where I'm going with this, right? So now if we go down to 2 levels, do we try to split evenly, or does like the bar shift for who goes into what level? Or if you had 3 levels, you know, like we'll go 0 to 30% is here, 30 to 60 is here, 60 to 90 is here, right? So now if you go to 2, is it a 45 and a 45?
No, we would open up additional sections. We would open up additional sections. The teachers still have to teach at least 5 classes a day. We're not going to reduce staff.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would just wonder, because as you were talking about that, I was like, how's that going to work?
I would answer that differently. Let's say there's 3
Mark,
groups.
make sure you use your microphone.
I'm sorry. Let's say there's 3 groups of 30. I'm going to call it the most advanced group of 30.
Right.
They will continue to be with each other. It's the 2 groups of 30 that have been in 2 separate classes, kind of a low and a middle.
Right.
They will be integrated.
Okay.
And then they'll be moved around so that class size is exactly what it was.
Okay. Yeah, because Scott, it goes back to what you were saying about the highest achievers. You know, you don't penalize them, of course not. So I guess that was kind of my question is I mean, obviously, and this is a horrible way of saying it, but somebody has to suffer a little bit by coming down. But you know, you kind of take the hit by trying to bring people up, and just kind of where that line was my.
Well,
question.
and there's also this kind of very arbitrary nature to where those lines of demarcation are, right? And what we've seen with the 3 levels is that the kids who get placed into lower levels based on whatever the matrix is, you know, the test scores of this, that, the other, the parents of means say, I don't want my kids in the lower level, put them in the middle level. But the parents who don't know about that keep their kids in that lower level. So the kids the kids of the parents of means go up here and they function okay because now they're with kids
And
who
you
are
get
higher
kids in the
performing,
bottom who
and now you
could
still
or
have
don't.
these kids who don't have a parent advocating for them who are down here, but if they had been up there, they probably could have done the same. So we're trying to take away those structural barriers that are arbitrary and hold all kids to the same standards because they can all learn.
Yeah, and that really was more of a clarifying question
Yeah.
on my part than it was any kind of criticism by any stretch of
Oh,
the
yeah,
imagination.
yeah, all good. No, I love our opportunities
Yeah.
to, like, you know, clarify what it is that we're trying to do because we
Because then
do
somebody's
want to
gonna
keep
ask me, I'm gonna be like,
reinforcing.
Well, Darcy said.
Yeah, well, we want to keep reinforcing that message that this isn't to take away from kids, this is to help, you know, raise all boats.
Okay, fine. So the second point, though, is going back to the code of conduct. So I feel very strongly about this. And, you know, Jennifer expressed it a little bit, but, I mean, you're all parents here. I know most of you are. I don't know everybody, so I can't say it. But to have your child, who's in 6th grade, so she's not in high school, so and we'll get back, Scott, to some of the things that you suggested, which do not apply in this situation. To have your child cry at night, beg you to be homeschooled, beg, I don't want to go to school. Can I be homeschooled? Beg, cry on a daily basis. Scott, you've got a daughter a couple years older than Natalie. How would you feel about that? I mean, think about that. On a daily basis. Because she believes, and Jennifer alluded to this before with the code of conduct, she believes, not necessarily, I'm not going to be, you as the collective, you've let her down. You've let her down. You have, you know, I'm a little old school. I get to be the crotchety, grumpy old guy sometimes. She'll tell you that. But the idea of, okay, so business environment. What's sexual harassment? A hostile environment, right? That's the definition of harassment at work, is when you create a hostile environment. So obviously, you know, from a legal standpoint, you can't do that. What happens when an organization, for lack of a better term, doesn't do what it has promised its constituents, the children, that it's going to do to protect them and create a safe and non-hostile environment? Now, Scott, to your point about, well, go to the teen center. No, come on. Why are you putting the onus on my daughter to go seek help? She did. She's been to the assistant principal many times. She's best friends with the guy on the team. You know? I mean, and they love her, and she's a good kid. But now you're asking her to do more? And again, to Jennifer's point about the restorative, listen, if a kid has an issue, we should do everything we can to help that kid learn how to behave in a microcosm of society. Absolutely. I'm not saying you know, put them out in the stockade and lash them. No, of course not. That's ridiculous. But at some point, don't you have to say enough's enough? Don't you have to say, okay, the in-school suspension, the counseling, all this is not working because this kid or kids are continuing the action with no fear of consequence because there is none for them. Was there a little shame that they all of a sudden have to have an in-school suspension? They got over that pretty quickly. And to a certain extent, they reveled in it because it was for them a mark of achievement. Look what I did. And I'm not, this was not a one-time incident. And believe me, I am not exaggerating this. So what happens then? At what point, you know, one of the recommendations from the assistant principal, who I give all kudos to, very professional woman, I can't remember her name right now, was kind of that counseling, interaction, group circle kind of thing. Other party didn't want to participate. And that was what Jennifer's question was. What happens when the parents of the other children do not want to participate? What am I supposed to do then? Because now you've left me no recourse. Because my child cannot get the answers that she wants from somebody of authority, whether it's a parent, whether it's administration, she's not getting that. So what do you tell her at that point? You know, and again, like I said, the pain in this child who is not doing nothing but trying to do the right thing, constantly, consistently doing the right thing, and has nothing to show for it but just another day of harassment and another day of pain and suffering. And one of you gentlemen over here was talking about, actually I think Marcia, you might say something about the intent with the kindergarten. Okay, and yeah, intent when you report things, obviously, that's a big difference. When you're a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old in kindergarten, you know, 10, you can do whatever. When you're a 12 or 13-year-old and you lie about what the intent was, but we all know as parents what the intent was, how do you deal with that? You know what I mean? Because all of a sudden now, you know, kids are smart. We all know that. You know, Darcy, your girls are the same age as Natalie. You know, if they got in trouble, I'm not saying they would, but they're smart enough to know how to play the system. I mean, I certainly was. I went to school here. I went to high school in Highland. I did all kinds of shit like you wouldn't believe. I never got in trouble. You know why? I knew how to play the system. Because I was seen as a good student. I was seen as a nice kid. I was down the principal's office and the vice principal's office all the time. But John didn't do it. John wouldn't have done that. You think kids don't know that? So what's the recourse? I mean, because like, how do you determine intent? And if you're basing the actions of the administration on intent, how do you gauge that for a 12-year-old?
I mean, I don't know any of the particulars of the situation, obviously, that happened, so it's hard to respond, really. But one of the things I can tell you that we're doing is we have created an additional position at the high school for an assistant principal. One of the downfalls, I think, of the last few years was the shared assistant principal between the middle school and the high school. And we saw that in multiple ways over the last couple of years. So there's now going to be a dedicated assistant principal in each building. So hopefully some of these situations that could carry on and, for lack of a better word, fester, will be able to be caught more quickly, more attention paid to them, and hopefully this will also improve that communication home. It'll improve a number of the issues that we've seen both in the middle school and in the high school, because there'll be that dedicated staff. In the high school, there's even then a third person that's the students. Darn it! I never get the name right. Youth safety specialist. So we're going to have lots of so-called boots on the ground to help with these kind of situations, to stop them, hopefully in their tracks. I'm so sorry to hear that, a situation was that pronounced and that distressing. That is really upsetting, and it is very frustrating if there's no, it feels on your end like there's no acknowledgement of that pain and suffering on the other end. I wish I had something else to offer as some concrete, way that could have been handled differently, because I just don't know. I don't know the particulars. But that's certainly not how we want children to go home at the end of the day. And there are systems in place that should catch situations like that, but I guess they clearly don't. They don't always work as intended in all situations. But I'm very sorry that you guys went through that last year.
Yeah, well, hopefully this new code of conduct, and I know that, again, because it was in flux last year, that there were some questions, even from the assistant principal. She's like, well, I know this, I'm hearing this, and I kind of felt bad for them, because they're trying to do the right thing, but they're not really sure what the right thing was, because there was that flux. And, but again, I think code of conduct, from what I've seen, again, I just looked at it, it was coming in a couple minutes ago, so, Scott, maybe we can talk about this offline at some point, but there has to be a line someplace where you say enough. And if that means I've got to do, again, talking about names and that, is it HIV? Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, because that was one of the things that came up, because, I looked through that, and I looked through it with a fine-tooth comb, and everything that happened could have been falling under that. But at the same time, listen, kids are kids. Kids are jerks. I was one. I know. They know. Nally knows. Everybody knows. But they're, so you don't want to just go screaming, crying wolf when there was something like, oh, really? And, that's not bullying. Back in my day, what bullying was. But at the same time, there's a line where was like, no, something's gotta happen, because now I'm failing her as a father. I always tell my kids I have two jobs in life. The first is to keep them safe, and the second is definitely to grow to be good people. When she comes home crying like that, I'm not doing my number one job. I'm not. And for me, and Jennifer will tell you, for me to come home from work on a work day, to come meet with the assistant principal to talk about a disciplinarian issue, that's not like, so the point is, it's gotten bad. And here's the thing, so based on this code of conduct that we now have that's going to be enacted, I don't want to say what assurances, but what assurances do I have that this isn't going to start in 2 weeks again? The same cycle, because it's the same kids. Now you're going to tell me in the last 3 months those kids have somehow reformed themselves? I don't want to be mean and cynical and grumpy old guy, but...
Did anyone talk to you guys about stay-away agreements? I mean, that's something that's put in place as well.
That was done with the children in question and one of Natalie's other friends. I don't know how much that is continued, but I know that was one of the things that was part of that. So yeah, I actually am familiar with that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, in the HIB, it's, if it, seems to, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck,
I'd like to also add, I just published on the website a flow chart. When you have a concern that's not addressed at a certain level, who you should contact, and I'm right there. So if it gets to a point at which next year, let's hope it doesn't, that you're frustrated and you feel like there's been an action and you've worked with the principal, it's time for you to call me and let me help you if I can. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and we did go through all the channels. Again, everybody in the administration was very helpful. I mean, they definitely took time out to meet with us and discuss everything. So I mean, I have nothing but praise for that part of the administration. Part of it was also, we got to the end of the school year and it was kind of like, well, do we, because we knew that there was going to be a new code of conduct, so it was like, we kind of got caught in between. Jennifer actually did draft the letter, which I didn't follow up on, it's my fault. But yeah, no, and again, I think it's just me being cynical, right? And it's just, I get it, but you have code of conduct there on paper, I see it, but I also saw it, my daughter showed me she signed on the first day of school last year.
Well, it's really like anything, right? I mean, you can't, as much as we would like to pretend that we can control human behavior and human interactions,
Right.
All the good intentions in the world and all the support systems in the world and guidance counselors and teen centers, and we're not going to be able to, modify everyone's behavior in a positive way as much as we may try. There are other factors and influences at work that, we can't always control for. So, all of us can do is try to put as many safety rails in place as possible and, do the best we can. But I keep coming back to the parental notification thing, if we're not working together with the parents to, mitigate these kind of
and
situations.
You mentioned before, also, and Jennifer alluded to this before, actually, when she explicitly said it. We talked to one individual who, again, I was amazed and appalled that this individual didn't know anything that was going on. Because this person, again, I'm being gender neutral because you know who I'm talking about, that the one person knew everything, the other person knew nothing. And they are both in positions where, again, as an outsider, but a fairly intelligent outsider, I would think they should have both been in concert, and they weren't. And it was just amazing that this one person, who knew Natalie very well, who knows Natalie very well, knew nothing about this, and was shocked when Jennifer mentioned it. The person said, really? I never, of course, it's Natalie's fault for not expressing that as well, but I'm just really surprised that, again, if it's one incident, no problem, that happens all the time, right? But being that there was a series and a pattern that those two individuals at a fairly high level and the administration did not know, I was very surprised about that. So that's obviously the logistic thing that, some of you guys got to figure it out, but just to reiterate and kind of jump on the bandwagon a little bit then, which was
Right.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming, guys. Okay, so we will go back to our board committee reports. Curriculum and instruction, Michelle is not here, but I think Rob, she passed the baton to you, am I correct?
Yeah, she did.
All right.
So going straight to the agenda, Number one, approval of field trips. The field trip there is for the Teen PEP training, which is the peer-to-peer sex education training in North Brunswick. The HIB incidents reports are from June. Approval of curriculum. We have updated curriculum for grades 6 through 12. If you were looking on the drive and you didn't see anything for grade 10, that's because that's driver ed. So that's that entire segment there is taken up by driver's ed, so there wasn't any curriculum written for that portion. 4 and 5, Schedule B, interscholastic schedules, university graduate students, and then one slight change, graduate student, where we moved the teacher, so the graduate student moved along with the teacher. In terms of our meeting, we did have a meeting last week. We mixed it up a little bit. It was Michelle and I, along with Mark Krieger and Ruth. So there's 4 of us there. We talked about the health curriculum and trying to balance the health curriculum between sex education and also the drug counseling that we have. The drug, because what we're looking at is whether or not we are required to have.
DARE.
Well, DARE is gone. It's replaced. I want to say lead.
Right.
And whether or not lead in combination with what we're already doing in our health classes is really just hitting it the same subject area twice.
Right.
I've not
And perhaps
heard very
not
good-
from a perspective that is,
Yeah, I've not heard very good things about lead so far. And I think a lot of people are on board with the idea that if we don't have to have it, we can eliminate it and just focus on our own health classes, and then we'll save some time there so that we're not double dipping into something that we don't need to. But Scott, you were looking.
We also talked about infusing more play-based learning at Irving.
Oh, yeah, I was going to get into that. So,
I shared with
it
them.
was great to have Mark there to talk about the play-based learning and whether or not we have everything there at the schools to have that play-based learning, because we're looking at whether or not we have all the materials there for the kids to actually really play in the classroom, whether or not they have things to play with, which was Mark's concern. So I think you were going to look at an inventory of the classrooms just to see what's there and what we can.
Mark has been an advocate for us trying to build more play sets into our programs. I also added that to the committee, we are building into every pre-K, K1 schedule at least 15 to 20 minutes of playtime daily. We're taking that from the literacy block. And we're going to quadruple the number of day of plays that we had. I have to get and thank Ruth for that. So we're going to do it 4 times a year. And we're going to be requiring our Irving staff to participate in professional development that helps encourage them, helps them better understand how to infuse play in their program. We'll probably use some of the contractual hours that they are obligated to work with us for professional development. Well, one of the last thing I'll add, we'll have likely the teachers who are on the committee I established to look at this, Christine Gappa, actually start with pre-K, Anna Vargas, Christine Gappa, Susan Curtin, and Mary Alsiker conduct those workshops.
And I think the only thing that, we also talked extensively about the middle school detracking, which we basically covered in public comment this evening, except for one aspect. I think we also talked about having a parent and student advisory group, and that would be formed just to kind of flesh it out more and assuage some of the concerns that people have.
well, and I think, as we move through this year, we need to look at that idea that we've talked about a few times about doing this panel discussion. Like, we've got national experts, ready to come in and.
We have one who's actually a specialist in math.
Yeah,
tracking
we're like.
at Rutgers.
Yeah, I've sit through this meeting. I've sat through curriculum committee meetings. And I'm still not convinced.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to having a panel.
Can we go back to the lead thing? Did that lead anywhere?
To lead, we want to.
Because this has been a little pet peeve of mine as well.
That's transition. The administration discussed it, and they believe we should move it away and have our focus on substance abuse be in our curriculum. But we haven't talked to the teachers yet. We want to get some of their input when they come back in the fall. So we'll have time. LEAD isn't usually introduced until the spring, and we are, regardless of LEAD, forging ahead with our new program, which includes a whole unit on substance abuse.
Teachers in general, or just the health teachers?
No, just the two middle school
Just-
health
okay.
PE teachers.
Okay, but administratively, you guys are on board for, cool. All right, anybody have any questions for Rob or Scott on any of the curriculum items? No? All right, thank you, Rob. Mark, Finance and Facilities?
Yes, indeed, thank you. So I want to go through the agenda. Items 1 through 14 are our usual bill lists and financial reports. Item 15 is membership in CJ Pride Minority Recruitment Consortium. And the point of that is to provide an avenue to recruit more minority candidates. Item 16 is something that Linda and I talked about at the last Finance Committee meeting with our insurance broker, which was to change our annual insurance premium to reflect an increase in our deductible to save $5,636. He recommended it because we haven't had claims in a few years. So we were literally paying more. We were paying more and not getting any benefit for it.
Is that one worded wrong? I move the Board of
Should be.
Education accept the recommendation of the superintendent to approve the reduction in the property insurance deductible from
Oh,
$1,500.
I'm sorry.
It should be the increase in the
Increase.
property insurance deductible from $1,000 to $5,000.
Let me read that in then, as such. I'll read the whole thing in. I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the superintendent to approve the increase in the deductible, property insurance deductible, from $1,000 to $5,000 per claim, thereby generating an annual premium savings.
It's a reduction in our...
Right.
Okay.
Of $5,636 for 2018-19 school year. We could have increased it even more, but
That's exactly when something will happen.
That's when something will happen. So
That's when fate goes,
Linda appropriately took the middle ground.
Good idea.
And if it's another 2 years, then we can.
So item 17, we're accepting a donation, thank you, from the class of 2018 for $3,000 to be used for the high school auditorium restoration project.
Fabulous.
Item 18 is our
Depressing.
attempt to bid out our athletic transportation, which we discussed very briefly at our finance meeting before the regular session. We had no bids. And apparently this is widespread, the inability to get bids, which means we may end up going back to using coaches at greater expense during the year to move our teams around. I think Linda is going to go, no, this was the second attempt. So we will probably have to go to the coaches.
Linda, what is the issue? Why is it that no one's bidding on these anymore? I know we've discussed this, but I don't.
Well, the initial problem was about bus companies that couldn't do athletic runs because it conflicted with the regular student pickup and drop-off of school because of school times.
Right.
Then, so they would have extra buses with extra drivers to handle athletic runs. But they can't get the drivers because the Department of Transportation, or Department of Education Transportation Department, has made it much more stringent.
So I feel like we need to get together with some other districts and do some advocacy around this. This is costing us some serious money.
This is an issue we've been discussing at Trenton. I'm on the legislative committee for NJASA, and it is systemic. It's already on everybody's radar, something that I think my association is going to try to work on. So not only are the...
I'll ask NJSBA too and see if they've done anything. Maybe there's a resolution we could adopt and do that for a delegate assembly resolution or something. We've got to do something.
There's another issue here, though, that I was alerted to by the commission, which we use to help us with the bid process, and that is there are more and more drivers, I'm being told, who just don't want to do it because they don't want to deal with the hassle of working with students, with kids who are misbehaving and whatnot. They can be making more money doing other things. So it's not, besides the rigorous standards, the increased, Linda didn't mention, but there's now much increased cost in getting the certification. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth the bang for the buck.
Increased cost to the drivers themselves to get
Correct.
themselves certified.
In fact, one school district nearby, which will remain able, is very large, in Middlesex County, has its own fleet, has to hire coach buses because they can't get enough drivers to drive their own buses.
It's insane.
Oh, my God.
Okay. That was the case last year. That's how bad it is.
So item 19 is acceptance of a grant application for $12,600. Unfortunately, last year we received $34,000. So this is a net reduction of over $22,000 in Title I assistance. I think it's Title I. Yes,
Yeah.
it's Title I. Item 20 is approval of contractors. Delta T does evaluations. This is evaluations for case management, nurses, aides, etc. And then NWEA is learning workshops, and St. Peter's is our school doctor. 22 is the amendment to an existing settlement agreement. 21, excuse me. I'm sorry, so this is an out-of-district special education placement, number 20, 3 of them, item 21. And 22 is an amendment to an existing settlement where the child is moving to a different school. Item 23 is an addition to the HPEA contract to add a junior paraprofessional position to the recognized position and establish an hourly rate of $8.60. This is for a student in our system who would like to be a paraprofessional, and this is a way to help to bring this student on and train her and move her forward. And we negotiated this with the association. And it's a very well thought out and very positive thing for this student. Okay. Number 24 is the addition of a one-to-one aide for a student attending an out-of-district school. 25 to 30 are contracts to coordinate transportation with different other districts or the Educational Services Commission, etc. And that's it.
Okay.
Oh, and before I go on, well, first if there's questions, and then I just give a very brief report on our committee meeting. Does
Anybody have questions?
Yeah, I couldn't quite figure out how being a member of CJ Pride would benefit our district.
I'm sorry, I'll clarify. So CJ Pride is a consortium of Middlesex and Mercer County school districts, about 15 of them, that get together, they pool their resources, and they produce recruitment fairs for minority candidates twice a year in the spring. So now that we're a member district, we can represent ourselves at this recruitment fair. We're trying to make a better effort to pull in minority candidates.
Oh, absolutely. And the recruitment fairs that they've had in the past have been like large events where there are a lot of people.
Say that again?
So the recruitment fairs that they've sponsored in the past, there's
Oh, yes,
people come?
this is an organization that's been around for years.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how many, but it's long existing. It came to my attention from Monique, or last year. It was a little too late for us to get in on the last spring. The initial startup fee is a one-time fee, and then I think it's $100 annual after that.
Yes, that's right.
So it's a very minimal fee.
And a lot of the big school districts in the area, they were all participants. So.
I think up in Middlesex County, North Brunswick is one of the only Middlesex County districts representing itself, but everybody else is like West Windsor. West Windsor's the host.
Okay. Thank you.
So as far as the finance, the committee, Linda gave us our usual report. We've started creating a list of the unforeseen revenues and expenses for the new school year. So that's just beginning, and there's nothing really to disclose. We're a few dollars ahead, but we've got lots of unforeseen expenses already. But we did get some more money from the state over this, I think $94,000 or $97,000 more, as we often do. And then Linda has given us a report of projection of available funds, which we can move, but not into, if we're ahead with leftover funds from 2017-18. Well, if we're behind, then that money will be kind of lost to us in 2018-19. We'll be a little bit more behind. But if we're ahead, the money will go into 2019. So at the moment, I think we were $4,000 ahead. And the auditor is coming in, and with the audit report, we should know exactly where we are. But it's very, very close. And kudos to Linda. You know, we estimated, I think, $1 million moving forward. Very, very close to that. So great job. Thank you. Any other questions?
Anything else for Mark? No? Okay, so we will move on to personnel. Judy?
Yes, okay. We did have our meeting with Ruth and I and Scott, and we've had a number of resignations, but happily we're on the agenda tonight is some new hires. I think we're down to just needing a para at Irving, the middle school, and 3 lunch aides. I think we're still looking to fill, but besides that, we're looking good. So I'm going to go through the agenda items. Okay. Number 1 is the source for teachers sublist. And then tonight, number 2, we have the approval of Dr. Taylor's replacement contract for 2018 to 2022 employment. We have the resignation of a Bartle Elementary School teacher, Mary Prugno, and then 4 and 5 are resignations of paras, both at Irving. We have the approval of administrative leave for employee 4659, effective September 4th. We will be striking items 7 and 8 tonight. Number 9 is a stipend for Jody Parsons, who's our technology technician. She has additional duties that she's responsible for relating to NJ Smart reporting, so you'll see that listed in number 9. Number 10 is the transfer of a special ed teacher to Irving, and then some transfer of paras, and that's all relating to, where they're needed for class size. There's a correction in number 12, but it is the hiring of the maternity replacement assistant principal, Amanda Rosenberg, at the middle school. It should read, though, effective September 1st, 2018 through March 29th, 2019. Number 13th is the appointment of a maternity replacement elementary teacher at Bartle, Alyssa Roybal. And then, let's see, we have a maternity replacement para, Laura Zaki. The appointment of the principal at Irving Primary School, Megan McNally. The new gifted and talented teacher we talked about tonight. As Scott mentioned, she does have a background also in special ed and STEM as well, so we're very excited to have her on board. We have a new guidance counselor, Nashwa Badawi, and she was an intern here, and she came with high recommendations from Ms. Kirk, right? So another person we're excited to have on board. 18 is an appointment of a Bartle Elementary School teacher, Allison Rocker. Then we have another Bartle Elementary teacher, Catherine Bender. Maternity replacement elementary teacher at Bartle, Julianne Erdy. We have a guidance counselor at the middle school, high school. Special ed teacher at the middle school, Christina Zam. And then 23 and 24, I'll explain a little bit. It's a part-time English teacher in middle school and a part-time math teacher. You all might remember that the math teacher who was on maternity leave took the part-time Irving school media specialist job. So the principal over at the at the middle school decided she wanted to split the position, and have a part-time math teacher and a part-time English teacher to help with class sizes. So that's why we have two, we hired two part-time teachers rather than one full-time math teacher. Then number 25 is another para at the middle school, Real Knight, another para at the middle school, a para at Bartle. We did hire one lunch aide, number 28. We worked on a new job description, not a new position, but a new revising of a job description for the staff and student support teacher over at Bartle. Ruth and I gave some recommendations, so Scott's going to revamp that. Then the junior para, that what Mark mentioned, I think in his finance report, number 30. And then we have instructional assignments, number 31. Ever getting to the end of my personnel agenda. We had summer days for we have on number 32, we needed to assign more summer hours for Dee Dee Deacher due to the workload over with the educational services. Then we have number 33, some breakfast paras at the middle school. Then we have some staff for the Windows of Understanding meeting. We have number 35, consultation of compensation for staff to attend a district evaluation advisory committee meeting. Some math training approval, number 36, that goes on. And then we have 37, some Schedule B appointments, approval of a volunteer football coach, 38, some staff curriculum writing hours assigned to teachers under number 39. Teacher coordinator for the Title I Summer Holistic Program, number 40. PD in-service days for 2 teachers. Read 180 professional development, number 42. And then approval of payment for staff for preparation of the play-based learning workshops, number 43. Then we have some change of hours for summer 2018 child STEAM testing for IEP meetings. So some of them have gone up and some of them have gone down. And we have a change of hours for the extended school year. Those paras are listed. We have teachers that are giving hours for kindergarten orientation. And that is the end of my presentation.
Judy, my goodness. Does anybody have any questions for Judy on anything on the personnel agenda?
Number
If you're still awake.
12, the dates for the appointment,
Yes.
is that through March 29th of 2019?
Yes, 2019,
Okay.
yes. You weren't paying attention when I read in the correction.
No, I was still somewhere. Okay.
Yes.
And I also
Thank
just
you.
wanted to mention, normally when we are hiring a principal in the building, we make a big hoopla and the principal comes out and, and the only reason we're not doing that in this case is because Megan has been
Yes,
the
with us.
interim principal at the middle school. Megan took over at Irving when Kelly originally went out on maternity leave.
And was a wonderful special ed teacher for many, many, many years.
Right, exactly. So
It's anticlimactic.
Yes.
Thank you for saying something.
yeah, I didn't. We're
Yes,
not
I shouldn't
certainly
have
not
glossed
giving
over that.
Megan
Yes.
short shrift, but
No.
she's been here and she's done
I
that
think
tap
she
dance.
came
I think
when
a
she
couple
took
of
over
times.
maternity.
Exactly. She's done that tap dance a couple of times. So,
So no worries.
But it is not any indication of a lack of excitement that Megan
Correct.
is taking over at
Correct.
Irving, so.
She and I sent out letters to the community pointing out that we are going to recommend her and blah, blah, blah. We've gotten good feedback, so I think people are very receptive to her being on board.
Absolutely.
Yes, and Ruth and Ann and I did sit down with her and had a conversation about what her plans were as the, official principal instead of a fill-in. So we're really excited about some of her ideas. It's going to be a good match.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on any personnel items? No? All right, no Anne here for policy. Anybody who was in any policy meetings? Did anybody get tagged or tapped?
She asked me to do it, and I said, Michelle, why don't you take a turn? But since Michelle's not here, I'd be happy.
Michelle's not here.
I'd be happy
Thank you, Mark.
I'd be happy to move these when we're ready to move them.
Okay.
We did go through the first reading, 3 new policies. They're on the board drive. Harassment, intimidation, and bullying update. Immigrant justice, which came from a local immigrant justice group and was somewhat rewritten. I took a hack at it, and then others of us went over it. And then equity in educational programs and services was reviewed. And then we have the 2 policies for second reading, which is the grading system and the cultural competency policies. And if there are questions, I'll do my best. And Scott was there, and others of us were there, so we could do our best to go over them.
I'll point out there were no new changes made to the second read policies.
Right.
And
No.
point of interest, we referred to Strauss-Esme for some assistance on the immigrant justice policy because one does not exist officially in the Strauss-Esme system, and they said they created a number just for us.
Wow.
Which is 5111.8.
I see.
So congratulations.
We cleaned up with some of the language concerning the kind of nomenclature around ICE officers versus police officers, and kind of codified it so it was clear what the policy is in regard to, in effect, any officer who wants access to the buildings or access to the kids or the families, etc. And it I think made it much tighter in a number of ways and places.
Right. So I was particularly excited about that policy. There were a couple of typo-y kind of things that I'll just send to Anne to be fixed between first and second reading. But the one question I did have, and I don't know if this is something that you guys discussed, was on the first page of the policy 2A, which says to verify age, schools will not require a birth certificate or other documentation that exposes a student's place of birth. Instead, can provide a religious, hospital, or physician certificate showing date of birth, an entry in a family Bible, an adoption record, or an affidavit from a parent. I was just wondering if that's been run by the attorneys and if that's all copacetic.
Not to my knowledge, but in fact, that's not one of the areas we changed. So in other words, this is verbatim from the sample policy we got.
Right, but I don't know where the
Scott
sample policy is from and if that comports to New Jersey law.
Good question.
It would it seems like it would be
I didn't even
something
think of
before
it.
we put that into policy, we should run it by our attorneys and
Scott, could
Yeah, I can do that.
could you do that? Thank you.
Yeah,
I
I'll
didn't even
run
think
it
of
by.
it, Darcy. That's a great question.
By the way, this policy is modeled after the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice
Right.
sample policy.
Yes. Right.
So you're right, the language is taken lifted right off that policy. But I'll check with Jonathan on that.
yeah, but I would prefer to have our
That's a great
our school
idea.
attorney look at a brand new
great
policy
idea.
that we're potentially putting
Sure.
out there in the world. And same on the harassment, intimidation, and bullying one, I just had some housekeeping items. But I did have one thought on the equity and educational programs and services policy, especially since we were, we're doing the immigrant justice policy at the same time. We put in the laundry list of students that we want to make sure have access to our programs, but we talk about national origin, but we don't talk about immigration status. I'm wondering if we don't
could
want to
add that.
add that into.
We could add that. Why don't you send that to Ann?
Okay.
Okay, well, make a
So
note
I just had
for
a
the
little
next meeting
note to add immigration status in there.
in the equity and educational programs
Right.
policy.
And then on the second page of that same policy that talks about equity in physical education training, and it says all school districts' physical education programs will be co-educational. I was wondering if we don't also want to add health curriculum in there, because that's just a nice place to
talking about that.
slip that right in there.
Physical, yeah. So the heading would be equity in physical and health education
Yeah.
training. Yeah, that's a great idea.
We have a meeting on September 18th, so we could address this.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
I should probably clarify to the community, very brief, what the HIB changes were, policy changes. Really only a couple of things were updated. As the board's aware, the new reg now clarifies how imbalance of power plays into our determination if a HIB referral is affirmed. Our policy reflects that for the community's sake. Essentially, that means if there's some kind of a disagreement between students or a leveraging of one student's physicality, I'm having a hard time describing this, but against another. In the case I presented to the board earlier, if one student who's bigger is pushing around another student who's smaller, there may be an imbalance of power. The bigger kid is leveraging his physicality against the smaller kid. While the imbalance of power might not be considered a distinguishing characteristic that plays into our factoring, it is the circumstances surrounding that situation that could be determined to be a distinguishing characteristic. So in that example, size, child's physical size could be the distinguishing characteristic that led to the imbalance of power that would qualify as having fulfilled one of the prong tests to determine if a HIP investigation is affirmed. That's one thing that's in the policy. Another has to do with allowing the principal to make a determination if a HIP investigation should proceed based on some preliminary information. And I believe those are the only major changes.
Right.
Am I correct, Mark?
Yeah, that's
those
right.
two basic
Those are the two big ones.
changes.
And the first of those is fairly amazing that the state guidelines or policy or the State Board of Ed guidelines on this didn't include that in the first place, because that really tied our hands in a lot of cases where there was an imbalance of power and a big kid was pushing around a smaller kid, and you couldn't call that bullying, which didn't make a lot of sense to anybody on the board or outside the board. But that's changed now. Thank goodness.
So one thought I had on the HIB policy is on page 9 of the 19. It's section E, harassment, intimidation, and bullying reporting procedure, and it kind of gets to what we spent a lot of time talking about again tonight. The second paragraph there says the principal or designee will inform the parents of all students involved in alleged incidents and, as appropriate, may discuss the availability of counseling and other intervention services. Like, it's in our policy. And I put a little note even before we had this discussion tonight to say, could we add a time frame for notification? Like, should we put something in there concretely saying, and that has to happen within X amount of days, or 1 week, or... It's page 9 of the 19, and it's the second paragraph under E, harassment, intimidation, and bullying reporting procedure. Because yes, I read all 19 pages because I'm that big of a... No, I didn't read all 19 pages. I'm lying. I read the things that were changed. I'm totally lying. Totally lying. I just read the changes.
What's a reasonable time, Scott? A week?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally...
2 weeks?
Well, HIB regs, I think, require us to follow up within 5 days of a referral. So within those 5 days, the principal should be contacting the parent guardian. I'm not sure if you need additional language, unless you want to suggest per the requirement for a referral to be followed up. So shall the principal inform the parent or guardian within those 5 days about the matter.
So can you maybe chew on that?
And
I think it's a good idea.
Thanks, Mark.
It is.
one of the questions I had on
feel very supported.
12, page 18 and 19, approved private schools for students with disabilities. So does this mean that we ultimately have some responsibility if there's some sort of incident of bullying for an out of it'll be a student who's placed in an approved private school. And if there's an incidence of bullying there, we would have to investigate it along with the private school.
Can you point to the language again?
It's page 18 and 19 in 5512.
I think that's one of the changes in the state rules.
They kind
I
of
believe
put it-
so, yes. Scott may know more details, but I believe there's a lot of changes in the rules. The two major ones Scott went over, but I believe this one is included as well. So
just
pretty
reread that.
striking.
Make sure.
This is at the very end of page 18, Scott,
Right, right.
that we have to investigate private schools. Or we have to do an investigation of a complaint
Or
at
on
a
the
private
bus to
school
them.
where we've sent the child.
Amazing, we haven't had that come up.
Well, it's
Right.
not.
So in other words, if a student is being bused to an out-of-district placement on one of our buses, we're responsible for investigating the HIP.
Investigate
Referral.
the hit, or if it occurs at that.
But I'm not interpreting this language to mean that if it happens on site at the out-of-district placement, even though it's one of our students, that we're responsible.
Yeah, right, we're not ultimately responsible. It looks like in coordination with the approved privates, like with their staff also, we would look into it, but, okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, I realized I had one more quick thing. And that's on page 12 of the 19. The second to last full paragraph on that page that's highlighted about investigations or complaints, and if we don't have a staff member and the conflicts and all that kind of good stuff. And we did run into that a couple of times this past year. It seems like maybe we want to add language in there that there may, just as we experienced twice this past year, that there may not be a staff member that can conduct the investigation, and we have to go we have to hire an outside investigator.
How
Good point.
How about in the last sentence say, will appoint a staff member or outside party?
Yep.
But I'm sorry, what page again?
12, wait, 12?
Yeah, 12 is right.
12 of 19. It's the last highlighted. And clearly, we did it anyway without it being in the policy. But. Okay. Anybody else have anything on policy? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much, Mark, for pinch hitting. Monique, you have anything for us on equity and excellence now that I've caught you with cookie? Monique, you just took a cookie out of your purse. Now I'd like you to talk.
Nothing to report. We have not met. We will meet in September.
Okay.
Thank you. Back to my cookie.
All right. Let's see. Oh, so we've already done public comment, so we're just going to go right through and do our voting. So curriculum and instruction. Rob, you want to move those for us?
Yes, I'd like to move items 1 through 5.
5. Okay. Can I get a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? No. Seeing none. Linda, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simorusti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. Pietrobono?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
Okay. Mark, the finance and facilities items, could you move those, please?
Yes, I'd like to move 1 through 30.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No. Seeing none. Linda, we have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simorusti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Can I say yes except to no or 21 or abstain?
What's your decision?
You can say-
No
I
or
can say no.
abstain?
You
No.
can.
21, okay. Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. Pietrobono?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
Okay. Judy, could you move the personnel items for us, please?
Yes, I'm going to move items 1 through 6, striking 7 and 8, moving 9, 10, and 11, 12 with the correction, and then here we go, 13 through
46.
Where's the end?
There is no end.
13 through 46.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No. Seeing none. Linda, please could we have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
So I will abstain on 2, and I will say yes on the rest.
Ms. Pietrobono?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
Okay, and Mark, could you move the policies for us?
Yeah, I'd like to move numbers 1 and 2 in policies for the 5 different new policies for first and second reading.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No, seeing none. Linda, could we have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes?
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. Pietrobono?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
Okay, so we will quickly go through our board liaison reports. I don't think there will probably be much to report in August, but I'm assuming we don't have anything for September. Michelle's not here, so that wipes those out. Rob, do you have anything
Nope.
from HPEF? Okay. Commission for Universal Access, Judy? Nope. Yeah, I don't think anybody's doing much meeting over the summer. There is something from Rebecca on the public library in the drive. If everybody got a chance to take a look at that. I have nothing. I've heard nothing about Shared Services Committee with the borough. Ruth, any CPAC action?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay. Monique, Parents of Students of Color?
Nothing to report now.
Okay. No Ann here. I told you we were going to go fast. Mark, Board of Health meeting?
Board of Health doesn't meet in the summer.
Okay. Green Team, Rob, of course, they're not meeting. They're not even here. I have nothing for New Jersey School Board's Delegate Assembly, although if anybody thinks of anything they want for a possible resolution, let me know. Rob, Middlesex County, nothing?
No.
Wow, that was fun. So I think I sent everybody a text or an email or something, just to say to take a peek at the board goals. Obviously, we're not going to do anything with them tonight, but I just wanted to put this on everybody's radar that we're actually like a little behind schedule to make any tweaks to the board goals if we were so inclined, which are always on the very end of our agendas. You know, we don't want to be tweaking these too much because these, the 3 main goals are what align to our strategic plan. We're still in our, third year of our strategic plan. You know, so these are things that we've, you know, all decided on together as a board and a community, and are kind of you know, the targets that the administration, both, you know, district-wide and building level are working towards. But that said, if we're looking through some of these bullets and we see some that we've, you know, we feel are mostly completed or something that we need to add, we can tweak those a little bit. So I'd love to have that conversation at our meeting in September. So we'll, and
Well, I would encourage the board between now and September 17th to go to our Pathway website and download the updated strategic plan. Turns out that the updated strategic plan, I sent the Honeywell out to the community about this, goals that I narrowed down to are identical to the goals that the board agreed on last year. 3 goals left in our strategic plan for 18-19, 3 goals you have here. I do think, however, that a lot of the bulleted items have either been implemented, have been put aside, or are in progress. So if you go to our strategic plan website and you pull down the plan, you can do your own crossing out and mixing and matching as you see fit. Or I could do that for you if you'd like. It's up to the board.
if there are ones that you think are checked off, I would certainly, I don't know about anybody else, you know this more intimately certainly than any of us do. If you want to just give us a little, copy this down with a little check mark next to things that you think are, we're pretty solid on, and then we can work from there.
I'll put it in a Google Doc and I'll share it with the board prior to the meeting
Great.
next September.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's pretty much it for me for my president's report.
Darcy, were you going to mention the NJSBA October meeting?
Yes. So I think Janet sent an email to the full board earlier last week about the New Jersey School Boards Association annual conference, which they call workshop, which is in October. It's like the week of what, the like 23rd?
23rd,
to the
23rd
5th,
or 24th.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And if anybody's interested in going for all of it, part of it, a day of it, whatever, we need to figure that out by August 31st and get that to Janet, so.
And I just would again strongly recommend anyone who can go for even a day. It's extremely worthwhile. I mean, it's really worthwhile. You'll see what's happening around the state with other boards, and there's very, very good meetings that you can just pick up stuff.
Yeah, I would echo that. I went for one night last year, and I'm hoping that I'll do the same or something similar this year.
And we know a lot of good restaurants there.
Yeah, so I will definitely be going, much to my husband's chagrin, because I'll be coming off of my own conference for my job the weekend before. So I will come home on Monday and say, hi, how are you guys doing? And then take off and go to Atlantic City. So that's going to be a fun week for my husband. He's going to really like me a lot. So does anybody have anything for old business want to bring up? Nope. New business? Nope. Peeking at everybody? All right, so we don't have any more public unless John, decides he's, I think John's probably good. Nope. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, good night, everybody.
Oh, great.